James Sullivan stared at the holographic contract floating before him, its azure glow casting strange shadows across his scared knuckles. The sum displayed would clear his debts 3 times over, but something about this job made his combat-honed instincts bristle. "Mr. Sullivan, we await your decision." Ambassador Zarian's crystalline voice cut through the silence of his vast office aboard the Lysarian diplomatic vessel. The ambassador's translucent skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns, a sign of impatience in his species. "Protecting your daughters is one thing," James said, running a hand through his graying hair. "But you're asking me to live in their quarters, shadow their every move. That's more than a standard security detail." The ambassador's patterns shifted to deep purple. "These are not standard times, Mr. Sullivan. The peace treaty between the Lysarian Collective and the Earth Coalition hangs by a thread. My daughters, Kyra and Venna, are instrumental in these negotiations." As if summoned by their names, the office doors slid open with a whisper. James turned, and for a moment, forgot to breathe. The twins moved with identical fluid grace, their silver-scaled skin catching the starlight streaming through the viewport. But that's where the similarities ended. Kyra, the elder twin, wore the traditional robes of a Lysarian diplomat, her movements measured and precise. Her eyes, like liquid mercury, studied James with careful consideration. Venna, in contrast, wore a modified combat suit, her shorter hair styled in a way that reminded James of Earth's punk movement. She gave him a predatory grin that showed too many teeth. "So this is the famous James Sullivan," Venna said, circling him like a shark. "Former Earth Special Forces, decorated in the Proxima campaign, and now a freelance security specialist. Your reputation precedes you." "As does yours," James replied evenly. The incident at the Centauri embassy made quite a few waves. Kyra stepped forward, her voice soft but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. "That incident prevented 3 assassination attempts. We require someone who understands that our safety sometimes demands unconventional measures." James caught the underlying message. The twins weren't looking for a simple bodyguard. They needed someone who could operate in the gray areas between diplomacy and warfare. Someone who could make split-second decisions without waiting for approval from the bureaucratic chain of command. "There's something else you should know," Ambassador Zarian interjected. "My daughters possess certain abilities, gifts that make them uniquely valuable to both our peoples and uniquely vulnerable to those who would exploit them." James had heard rumors about the Lysarian royal lineage possessing telepathic abilities, but he'd dismissed them as propaganda. The serious expressions on all 3 Lysarians' faces suggested otherwise. "Show him," the ambassador nodded to his daughters. Before James could react, he felt a gentle pressure in his mind, like a cool breeze carrying whispers. Images flashed through his consciousness, memories of combat, of loss, of triumph, but viewed from outside, as if through another's eyes. Then, just as suddenly, the sensation withdrew. "That's just a taste," Venna said, her earlier playfulness gone. "There are people who would literally kill to possess what we can do. Some already have tried." James looked at the twins with new understanding. Their abilities made them not just politically valuable, but potentially the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. No wonder they needed someone who could guard them day and night. He reached out and signed the contract with a quick gesture. "When do we start?" "Immediately," Kyra answered, relief evident in her voice. "We have a diplomatic function tonight at the Earth Embassy. Intelligence suggests there may be unwelcome guests." As James followed the twins out of the office, he caught glimpses of their surface thoughts. Kyra's careful planning, Venna's barely contained excitement for potential action. He'd protected dignitaries before, but never ones who could literally get inside his head. This job would either be the most interesting assignment of his career, or the one that finally got him killed. Knowing his luck, probably both. The Earth Embassy ballroom was a study in calculated opulence. Holographic constellations danced across the vaulted ceiling, while anti-gravity platforms carried drinks that changed color based on the species of whoever picked them up. James stood at his post, looking every bit the part in his formal security attire, while keeping his eyes on the twins. Kyra moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her diplomatic training evident in every graceful gesture and carefully chosen word. She was currently engaged in conversation with the Andromedan trade minister, their discussion appearing casual but carrying the weight of trillion-credit trade agreements. Venna, meanwhile, was doing what she did best, making security personnel nervous. She positioned herself near the emergency exits, ostensibly admiring the artwork, but James knew she was cataloging every face that passed through those doors. Incoming. James sub-vocalized into his neural comm. 3 Rigelian delegates, approaching from your 6, Kyra. They're not what they appear to be. Kyra's thought touched his mind with the delicacy of falling snow. Over the past week, James had grown somewhat accustomed to the twins' telepathic communications, though it still sent shivers down his spine. Their biometric signatures are wrong, Venna's thoughts added, tinged with the sharp edge of anticipated violence. Too steady for Rigelians. They're wearing mimetic masks. James casually adjusted his position, placing himself between the approaching delegates and Kyra. His augmented vision zoomed in on their faces, noting the almost imperceptible flicker of holographic disguises. Ambassador Kyra. The lead Rigelian's voice was perfect, down to the characteristic harmonic undertones. Such a pleasure to finally meet you. Kyra turned, her smile diplomatic, but her mental warning to James screaming danger. The pleasure is mine, though I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. The lead Rigelian's hand moved slightly, and James caught the glint of something metallic. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, seemingly stumbling into the delegate. My sincerest apologies, he said loudly, while his enhanced fingers crushed the neural disruptor hidden in the imposter's sleeve. The false Rigelian's eyes widened in pain and recognition. In that moment of confusion, Venna appeared as if from nowhere, her combat training evident as she smoothly escorted the other 2 delegates toward a private alcove, her grip on their arms promising broken bones if they resisted. The Northeast Service Corridor is clear. Kyra's thoughts guided them as James forcefully steered the lead assassin after Venna. Within moments, they had their would-be attackers secured in a maintenance room, away from the prying eyes of the diplomatic gathering. Now then, Venna said, her predatory grin returning as their captives' holographic disguises flickered and failed, revealing pale, cybernetically enhanced faces. Let's have a chat about who sent you. The lead assassin spat something in an unknown language. James didn't need a translation to recognize a curse. Allow me. Kyra stepped forward, her eyes taking on a mercurial sheen. The assassin's face contorted in panic as she gently pressed her consciousness against his mental barriers. Careful, James warned, noting the neural implants visible beneath their captive's skin. Those cybernetics could be rigged too. The warning came too late. All 3 assassins convulsed as their neural implants activated, their bodies seizing before collapsing. James caught Kyra as she stumbled back, the psychic backlash of their deaths hitting her like a physical blow. Dead man switch, Venna snarled, checking the bodies. Someone really doesn't want us knowing who they work for. James helped Kyra steady herself, noting how she leaned into his support more than strictly necessary. What did you see? He asked softly. Fragments. Kyra's voice was shaky. A symbol, a broken circle with 3 lines through it, and a name, Project Eclipse. Never heard of it, James frowned. That's what worries me, Venna said, her combat suit already working to erase any evidence of their presence. In our line of work, the most dangerous players are the ones nobody's heard of. Kyra straightened, though her hand remained on James's arm. We need to contact Father. This goes beyond simple assassination attempts. Someone is trying to. Her words cut off as the lights in the corridor suddenly died. Emergency sirens began wailing throughout the embassy. Multiple breaches detected. James's security feed crackled. Unknown hostiles entering through sub-level 3. All security personnel. Protect your principals. They're hunting us. Venna's thought carried images of combat and movement. The assassins were just a distraction. James drew his pulse pistol, positioning himself between the twins and both ends of the corridor. We need to move. Now. The diplomatic summit is in 3 days, Kyra said, her voice steady despite the situation. If we run, the peace treaty dies. If we stay, we die, James countered, already plotting escape routes. Venna's laugh was sharp and cold. Then we don't run, and we don't stay. We hunt them back. As if in response to her words, the emergency lights began to strobe, casting alternating patterns of light and shadow down the corridor. In the distance, they could hear the sound of weapons fire and screaming. James looked at the twins, Kyra with her diplomatic poise and hidden steel, Venna with her barely contained fury and tactical brilliance. He'd sworn to protect them, but in that moment, he realized they might end up protecting each other. All right, he said, checking his weapons. Let's go hunting. The safe house was 30 levels below the glittering surface of the capital, in a district where the neon lights never quite reached. James secured the perimeter while the twins conducted their own unique form of surveillance, their minds reaching out to detect any hostile thoughts in the vicinity. Clear, Venna announced, though her posture remained tense. The attack at the embassy had left 17 dead, including 3 council members. The fact that they'd escaped at all was nothing short of miraculous. Kyra sat at a battered console, her fingers dancing over the holographic interface as she sorted through encrypted communications. Her usual diplomatic composure had given way to focused intensity. The attack pattern wasn't random. They knew exactly where to hit, when to hit, and who would be there. Inside job, James confirmed, checking the feeds from the microdrones he'd deployed around the building. The question is, how high up does it go? The twins shared one of their silent conversations, a habit that had stopped bothering James weeks ago. Finally, Venna spoke. We need to show him. Kyra hesitated, then nodded. During the attack, when I touched the assassin's mind, I saw more than just the symbol and name. I saw faces. One of them was High Commander Raylan. James felt his blood run cold. Raylan was their father's most trusted advisor, the architect of the peace treaty itself. Are you certain? Unfortunately, Kyra's silver eyes met his. Would you allow me to share the memory with you? It's more intimate than our usual communications. James nodded, bracing himself. What followed was unlike anything he'd experienced. He wasn't just seeing Kyra's memory, he was living it. The assassin's dying thoughts cascaded through his mind. Secret meetings in shadowed rooms, Raylan's voice discussing harvesting procedures, laboratory images that made his stomach turn. When the connection broke, James found himself gripping the edge of a table, his knuckles white. They're not trying to kill you, he realized. They want to capture you, study you. Project Eclipse, Venna's voice was cold. A research initiative to unlock and weaponize Lysarian telepathic abilities. They need us alive for their experiments. Father would never allow this, Kyra insisted, but doubt crept into her voice. Maybe he doesn't know, James suggested. Or maybe. A sudden spike of alarm shot through his mind. Venna's warning. Simultaneously, his security feeds went dark. They were under attack. Down. James tackled both twins as the windows exploded inward, spraying the room with shattered glass. Armored figures repelled in, their weapons charged with neural disruptors designed to incapacitate without killing. Venna reacted first, her combat training merging with her telepathic abilities in a deadly dance. She seized control of one attacker's mind, forcing him to fire on his companions. Kyra erected a telepathic barrier, deflecting the neural pulses while James engaged in close combat. But these weren't ordinary soldiers. Their minds were shielded, making them resistant to the twins' abilities, and they moved with the precision of elite special forces. James. Kyra's warning came a split second before a neural pulse caught him in the shoulder. His left arm went numb, but his combat augments kept him moving. He dropped 2 more attackers before a second pulse hit his leg. Through the haze of encroaching paralysis, he saw Venna take a direct hit, crumpling to the ground. Kyra screamed, her telepathic powers lashing out in raw fury. The attackers nearest to her dropped, blood streaming from their noses. But there were too many. As James's consciousness began to fade, he saw a familiar figure step through the broken window. High Commander Raylan surveyed the scene with cold satisfaction. "Secure the twins," Raylan ordered, "and dispose of the human. We can't have any witnesses." "No." Kyra's protest was both verbal and mental, her power straining against neural dampeners as their attackers moved in. James fought against the paralysis, his augments burning through power reserves as they tried to counter the neural disruption. He had one chance. His hand closed around a small device in his pocket, an emergency beacon that would alert every security force in the sector. He met Kira's eyes across the room, saw the terror and determination there. "Trust me," he thought as loudly as he could, hoping she would hear. Then he triggered the beacon and threw himself through the window. The last thing he heard before gravity claimed him was Raylan's furious order to pursue. The last thing he felt was Kyra's mind brushing his own, a desperate mixture of fear and faith. Then darkness took him, and he fell through the endless levels of the city, knowing that when he woke, if he woke, he would have to find a way to save the twins from their own people, or watch as they became weapons in a war that would consume the galaxy. James woke to the harsh buzz of medical equipment and the dull throb of partially healed wounds. A quick systems check showed his augments were running at 60% capacity. Not ideal, but enough for what he needed to do. He was in a cramped clinic in the Undercity, where doctors asked few questions and accepted untraceable credits. "Your landing jets saved your life," a gravelly voice said. James turned to see Marcus Reed, an old teammate from his Special Forces days, now working as an information broker. "Though I'd say it was a close thing." "How long?" James's voice was raw. 3 days. They've moved the twins to a research facility on the Outer Rim, place called the Crucible. Marcus projected a hologram showing a fortress-like structure built into an asteroid. Whatever they're doing in there, they're spending a lot of resources to keep it quiet. James sat up, ignoring the protest from his healing bones. The peace summit. Postponed due to security concerns. Ambassador Zarian made a public statement about his daughters being taken to a secure location after an assassination attempt. The official story paints you as one of the assassins. Of course it does. James studied the hologram. "I need a way in." Marcus laughed without humor. "The Crucible has better security than most military installations. Force fields, automated defense systems, psychic dampeners. And that's just what I know about. It's a suicide mission." "They're alive." James touched his temple. "I can still feel them, especially Kyra. The connection's weak, but it's there. They're waiting for me." His old friend sighed, then pulled out a data crystal. "I figured you'd say that. Here's everything I could dig up on the facility. Security rotations, supply schedules, maintenance logs. You'll have one shot at this. The dampeners mean the twins won't be able to help you once you're inside." James absorbed the information through his neural interface, already formulating a plan. "What about Raylan?" "He's there, overseeing something called Project Eclipse personally." "James." Marcus hesitated. "The energy readings from that place are off the charts. Whatever they're doing to those twins, it's big. Galaxy-changing big." "I know." James stood, checking his weapons. The twins had shown him glimpses of their true potential, the ability to not just read minds, but influence them on a massive scale. In the wrong hands, they could be used to enslave entire populations. The rescue operation took 3 days to prepare. James called in every favor he had, emptied every secret account. He needed specialized equipment to bypass the Crucible's defenses, and intel on guard rotations that even Marcus couldn't access. Finally, retrofitted with experimental stealth tech and carrying enough firepower to start a small war, James approached the Crucible in a modified smuggler's ship. The facility hung in space like a malignant tumor, its surface bristling with weapon emplacements. "Hold on," he thought, hoping against hope that the twins could sense him coming. "I'm almost there." The first part of his plan worked perfectly. He slipped through the facility's outer defenses by hiding in the wake of a supply ship, then used maintenance codes to access a secondary airlock. The stealth tech kept him invisible to most sensors, and his combat augments helped him avoid the patrols. But as he descended deeper into the facility, following the trail of power readings to the central research labs, he felt something was wrong. The security was too light, the corridors too empty. Then he heard Kira's scream, not with his ears, but in his mind. The psychic dampeners weren't working. Or worse, they'd been deliberately disabled. He rounded a corner and found himself in a vast chamber. In the center, suspended in crackling fields of energy, were the twins. Their silver skin had turned almost translucent, showing the network of veins beneath. Cables and sensors covered their bodies, feeding data to banks of humming equipment. "Right on schedule," Raylan's voice echoed through the chamber. The High Commander emerged from the shadows, flanked by guards. "I must admit, you survived your fall with more resilience than expected." "Let them go." James raised his weapon, but Raylan merely smiled. "You still don't understand what's happening here, do you?" He gestured to the twins. "We're not trying to weaponize their abilities. We're trying to transcend them, to evolve our entire species." As if in response to his words, the energy fields intensified. The twins' eyes snapped open, glowing with an inner light that made James's combat systems scream warnings. "The dampeners weren't to contain them," Raylan continued. "They were to protect us while we helped them reach their full potential. And now," he spread his arms, "now they're ready." The twins spoke in unison, their voices overlapping in a way that made reality itself seem to shiver. "We are." James felt their minds touch his. But these weren't the gentle presences he'd come to know. These were vast and terrible, filled with power that no beings were meant to contain. "The question is," Raylan smiled at James, "whose side will they choose?" The chamber hummed with power as James faced the transformed twins. Their silver skin now rippled with patterns of light, and their eyes blazed like miniature supernovas. The force of their combined psychic presence made the air itself feel thick and heavy. "Look at them." Raylan's voice swelled with pride. "Perfect vessels for the next stage of Lizarian evolution. With their power, we can reshape the minds of entire civilizations. Peace through unity, through shared consciousness." "You mean slavery?" James kept his weapon trained on Raylan, though he knew it would be useless against the twins' abilities. "Forcing everyone to think the same way isn't peace. It's extinction." "Perhaps," Raylan conceded, "but better extinction than the chaos." "The facility's core is destabilizing," she reported, her voice her own again. "This whole place is going to tear itself apart." Raylan pulled a neural disruptor, but Kyra's enhanced abilities crushed it instantly. "It's over," she said. "Project Eclipse dies here. Everything I did was for our people." Raylan's facade of control cracked. "Without this, we're just another species fighting for survival in a hostile galaxy." "No," Kyra's voice carried the weight of certainty. "We're people who get to choose our own destiny, just like everyone else." The chamber's destruction was accelerating. James grabbed both twins. "We need to move. Now." They fought their way back through the facility, using their combined abilities. James's combat skills, Vena's tactical knowledge, and Kyra's enhanced power, to clear a path. Behind them, the crucible began to break apart as the twins' escaped power triggered a chain reaction in its core. They reached James's ship just as the first major explosions began. As they pulled away from the doomed facility, Kyra and Vena used their abilities one last time, not to control or destroy, but to ensure that everyone who could reach an escape pod did. In the ship's cockpit, watching the crucible collapse into a fusion-bright cloud, James finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind. What happens now? Father will have to be told the truth, Kyra said. About Raylan, about Project Eclipse, about everything. The peace summit will proceed, Venna added, but this time with real transparency. No more secrets. And us. James looked between them, feeling the remnants of their enhanced powers still humming in the air. Kyra smiled, her hand finding his. We make our own destiny. Together. All of us, Venna agreed, her predatory grin returning. Someone has to keep you both out of trouble. As their ship headed back toward the capital, James reflected that his life had become infinitely more complicated since taking this assignment. But looking at the twins, Kyra's quiet strength, Venna's fierce loyalty, both of them choosing their own path despite everything. He wouldn't have it any other way. Some things, after all, were worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth loving. And in the vast, complex, sometimes hostile galaxy they called home, that was the only truth that really mattered.